why do we need men? Why do we need dads? And that's a much more kind of recent phenomenon in the sense of being dads. And the answer is because actually there's this amazing work by Anna Machin. She's an anthropologist at the University of Oxford about fatherhood. And she's, so I'm just paraphrasing her now, but she has this wonderful description of how we invented fatherhood because we went bipedal. Do you know all this?
No.
And the baby's head thing? It's amazing. So we had this bit of a crisis hundreds of thousands of years ago. I'm terrible at remembering whether it's millions or hundreds of thousands. So
a long time ago.
Google it. Right. Back in the ancestral times is what people say. Right. So what happened was we had this massive growth spurt in our brains, in our heads. Right. So we got massive heads, but we also went bipedal. And if you're bipedal, your hips can't be that big. And so women couldn't get the heads of the babies out of their smaller hips, right? So we're actually facing a bit of a crisis. So the way we solved that crisis was by giving birth to babies way earlier than we should. Way, way earlier. In fact, if we were like other mammals, pregnancies would last about 2 years. So I don't know how women watching will feel about that. Can't speak to that, but 2 years would be about the average, right? We obviously do it at 9 months. So they're incredibly vulnerable. And mum has to literally keep feeding them, right? And the calorific requirements, just the amount of food that they need, mum and baby, was huge. And so dad, go get food, right? This is only going to work. We're only going to survive as humans if this stuff comes. So in a way, that was the invention of fatherhood. And you see the brains of fathers getting activated by all this stuff. So being needed by the community, family, etc., to produce something, to provide something is... I think it's just deeply encoded. It's encoded in our DNA. It's like part of, like if we're not needed, then we're dead because we're going to be on our own, right? So these ties, familial ties, tribal ties, are actually central to our identity. And so the danger now is that if people, particularly men, start to feel like, am I needed? Does the community need me? Do my kids need me? Does the woman I've had my children with need me? Am I needed? If the answer to that is not clear, I think that has all kinds of downstream consequences. And we've just done a really poor job of making sure that even in this time of great transition, we still need you. We need every man, every boy, everybody. We need you. We don't yet know exactly what we need you for, but by God, we need you. We cannot afford to lose you. You are precious. And we need you. I don't know what you're going to go on to be yet, but by God, our community cannot afford to lose you. And so that message of just like how much we need you, I just think we've lost a little bit of that in recent debates. And too many men have drawn the conclusion that maybe they aren't needed, with tragic consequences.
A few questions there, just because I want to make sure I'm clear. Fiona's work in Australia around these letters that men had left before they had died by suicide. Did she also look at the letters that women had left?
No, she only looked at men.
Okay, fine. That's my first question.
Yeah.
And for me, the key thing in the suicide stats is that it's increasing.
Mm-hmm.
It's increasing.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're saying that it's a case of men not feeling needed, then why is that sense that men aren't needed increasing? If we're saying there's some kind of link between those two ideas.
Yes. Because the extent to which they're needed is less clear now than it was. Right? So it was very clear before that you're needed because you're the breadwinner.
Okay.
You're the provider, right? So go back, and I think part of the point here is that this idea of being kind of, maybe this gets us into discussions about masculinity, but being generative, like producing, providing, it gets narrowed down to like the breadwinner model of like post-war Western societies. Like it's like a wage earner, but that's not all it means. It used to mean going and getting meat. It used to mean helping farm together. There's all kinds of ways you can be a provider.
Service, I guess, as well. Just like
it's about being more. There's this great line from C.S. Lewis, the very good theologian, but obviously much better known for his work on The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, the Chronicles of Narnia. But he had this lovely line, and he was talking here about what it meant to be a Christian. But I think it applies to what it means to be a mature man as well. He said, you shouldn't think less of yourself. You should just think of yourself less. And there's something about service and like just doing for others, your family, your community, etc., that I think is quite intrinsic to these ideas of mature masculinity. And if men don't feel as if they are necessary or encouraged to have a kind of distinct and important role in the family, in the community, then I think that kind of question mark over, well, am I needed anymore, is a real one. And lots of people like Margaret Mead, anthropologists in the 70s, and a lot of conservatives were saying, look, if women do achieve a significant degree of economic independence, she thought that was a wonderful thing. The conservatives didn't, right? But they all agreed that we will have to think really hard about men. How do we make sure that men still feel connected and needed in our society if we have very quickly changed the central way in which they express that?
A few things came to mind. So it's interesting. Before I move forward on this point, when you were talking about this idea of humans needing to be needed, it made me reflect on some of the stats that came out around how quickly someone dies after they retire.
Yeah.
And that kind of general narrative that if you retire, you don't have long left, which is kind of, this idea of a social tribe and feeling like you need to be serving the tribe in some way. I've always wondered if there was any truth to that, this idea that, retirement can speed up your mortality. Because so it's almost like there's something in your body. Either one or two things could be happening. Number one, you just sit around more, which means,
you're more sedentary.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
It's just going to kill you anyway. But number two is that there's almost, I don't know, I've pondered this idea that there's this almost device in our brains that makes us the tribe. And when it knows that we might have switched from becoming useful to the tribe to becoming burdensome to the tribe in some way, now that we're consuming resources but providing none, this device in our brain like turns us off or something.
Yeah, that's what we're done. We are surplus to requirements.
Yeah, we're surplus to
requirements. So the decent thing to do is just, die.
For the tribe.
For the tribe.
And that we theoretically, from an evolutionary standpoint, we evolved as tribes. So it's not impossible that there's some,
Well, I do think that of course, we didn't used to live anything like as long.
Yeah.
This is a stat that I came across today, this new book that's just come out, which is in 1963, the most common age of death was 1, and now it's 83 or whatever, right? Do you know what I mean? It's like, so the progress we've made towards greater life expectancy generally has been huge, but it has then asked these questions about kind of being needed later on in life. So there's a couple of things I would say. One is that like having a job is just a massively powerful way of feeling needed, right? Just showing up. Like we need you to start to open up at 6. We need you to and in fact, Arthur Brooks, who used to run the American Enterprise Institute, he tells this wonderful story. He was interviewing this guy who'd come out of prison, was in this new program, rehabilitation, etc. And he's just chatting to him, and the guy gets a text while he's chatting to him, and he bursts into tears. Gets really tearful. And Arthur says, is everything all right? Did you get some bad news? What's happening? Is this bad news? And he said, no, it's the opposite. And he showed the text to Arthur. And the text just said, Fred, can you get over here as soon as possible? I really need you. And the guy said to Arthur, I've never heard anyone say that sentence to me before. I've never had anyone say to me, I need you. And in this case, it was, I need you to come and, I don't even know what it was, right? Fix this floor tile, deal with this customer. I don't know, but I need you. And it brought this guy to tears because he hadn't kind of felt that sense of neededness before. And at its best, the workplace signals to us on a daily basis or whatever, like, yeah, you're needed, right? Your colleagues need you. They need each other. That's huge. And so if you then don't have that in the labor market, maybe because you've retired, the question is, are you still needed? And then I just think we have to reinvent the ways in which we can make use of the skills and wisdom of the people who've suddenly got time. So my mum, she volunteers as a reader in a primary school because she has time, right? And it's amazing. She gets to know the kids really well and she loves it and so on. My father, he's on the board of a technical thing and he runs charity. They do stuff, right? They raise money for all these because they've got time. And so they're contributing to the community in a new way. And actually, as more and more women work, those community roles that were previously very often filled by moms at home, like school volunteering, for example, right? Now they can be done perhaps by older people. And so part of this story here, I think, is also making sure that older people don't lose that sense too, because although we focus quite rightly on what's happening to young men, the suicide rates among older men are also very high, especially if they end up on their own. So kind of men on their own later in life are at massive risk, because if you take my theory about being needed quite seriously, they're just looking around and saying, will anyone even notice if I'm gone? Maybe they'll be better off. And so even for those older men, we have a job of work to do to make them feel really like, yeah, we need you. Your church needs you. Your scout group needs you. Your local charity needs you. Your neighbors need you. The kid across the street who needs help with his university applications needs you. The boy down the road who's like struggling a bit because, his parents have split up and just wants someone to give him a cup of tea every now and again and talk to him. They need you.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.